The room smelled like antiseptic and iron. Machines beeped faintly somewhere above my head. I could barely move, barely breathe, but I felt everything, especially her hand. It wasn't holding mine, it was gripping the oxygen mask strapped across my face. Margaret's manicured fingers didn't shake. Her eyes, once tearful and desperate the night she begged me to marry her, now looked at me like I was an old obligation she'd finally found a way out of. No pity, no regret, just quiet relief. And when she leaned forward, her voice was ice. "You should have just taken the money, Robert." My vision blurred as she pulled the mask free. The air turned razor sharp, thin, vanishing. My lungs collapsed inward. Her silhouette remained, perfect posture, white coat, red lips curled in the faintest smile. Behind her, the hospital lights flickered, turning her into a shadow I could never reach. A sudden flash. 3 years ago. An alleyway slick with rain and blood. I was coughing up red into my hands, having shielded her from a man with a knife. She was crying then, hysterical. "I owe you my life, I'll never forget this, marry me, please, marry me." Back then, I thought that vow meant something. Another flash. The day we stood at the Civil Bureau. She wore a cream coat and looked down at the floor the entire time, saying her vows like they were court testimony. She never touched my hand again after we left that room. Another. Her father's voice, cold, composed, offering me 2 options. Take 10 million and walk away forever, or stay poor and have nothing. The child will carry her surname. You'll get no part of our name, no part of our wealth. I thought love meant sacrifice. I thought choosing her over money would prove my worth, that giving up everything, my career, my pride, my own name, would change how she looked at me. But all I did was dig my own grave. I never noticed the bitter pills Mom mixed into my tea. The way I slept more, moved less, until one day I collapsed. I thought it was stress. Love does that to people, right? The ultrasound picture disappeared from the fridge a week before I was hospitalized. And then, lying there, unable to move, I finally heard the truth. Her voice was sharp that time, honest, like she'd been waiting to say it. "I never loved you, Robert. The baby wasn't even yours." And as the air was torn away from me, so was the last piece of my heart. The last thing I saw was her smiling, after killing her own child and me. But the darkness didn't last. Suddenly, I gasped. My eyes flew open. I was back in that lavish penthouse lobby. The light was golden. Margaret stood beside her father, Peter. She was 7 months pregnant. Her face still held that fake softness, the mask she wore for public performances. Peter looked at me with disdain and repeated words I thought I'd never hear again. 10 million if you walk away now, or stay and get nothing. Decide. The marble floor felt solid beneath me, my lungs filled fully, my hand curled into a fist. This time, I wasn't going to die for anyone. Before all this, before the money, the poison, and the death, I was just a man who loved too blindly. My name is Robert, and I came from nothing. My father was a mechanic who died with oil under his nails. My mother cleaned hotel rooms until her back gave out. I inherited their hands and their hunger, but I also inherited their loyalty, and that's what ruined me. I worked days in construction, nights as a line cook, and weekends hauling furniture for people who didn't even remember my name. My shoes always had holes. My phone screen was cracked. I counted every coin I saved in a worn envelope taped to the bottom of my drawer. I wasn't saving for a new car. I wasn't saving for myself at all. I was saving for her, Margaret. I met her the night I almost died. A man was chasing her down a dark alley, knife drawn, eyes wild. She could have run. She froze instead. I stepped in. No hesitation. 3 stabs, 1 lung pierced, 4 days in ICU. She never left my side. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was her, red-rimmed eyes, trembling hands, her voice whispering, "Please, let me repay you. I'll do anything. Marry me." At the time, it didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like love. She moved into my tiny apartment 2 weeks later. She never touched a dish, never folded a blanket, never bothered to learn the bus schedule, but I didn't mind. I thought she came from privilege, from a family too strict to let her breathe. I thought I was saving her again, this time from a life without freedom. I sold my motorbike to buy her a ring. She never even looked at it when I proposed. Still, I kept loving her. When she sighed at the cheap heater, I took on another job to buy a better one. When she rolled her eyes at my calloused hands, I bought lotion and wore gloves at work. When she complained about my snoring, I slept on the couch. Not once did I ask her to change, I just kept adjusting, folding myself smaller and smaller to fit whatever shape she wanted me to be. She never introduced me to her family, always said they were controlling, but one day she told me she was pregnant. For a brief, shining moment, I thought, maybe now, I'll be enough. That was the day I met her father, Peter. Tall, silver-haired, eyes like a courtroom verdict. He didn't offer me congratulations, he offered me options. $10 million, you take it, disappear, and leave my daughter and this child out of your peasant future, or stay, get nothing, and the child will take her surname. I didn't even hesitate, I chose to stay. I thought Margaret would be proud, she never was. From that day on, she never touched me, never called me her husband again. I became a shadow in my own life, a placeholder, a liability. And all the while, she smiled in public, held her belly, played the perfect wife for the cameras. Behind closed doors, I slept alone. The last gift she gave me was betrayal. She poisoned me slowly, pills in tea, silence as my body failed. She aborted the child at 7 months and I wasn't even allowed in the room. And on the final day, she took off my oxygen mask like she was peeling away a sticker she didn't want anymore. I died with her name on my lips. But not this time. In the Reborn timeline, I looked at her father with a calm I didn't feel before. The penthouse was warm, gold light slanting through floor-to-ceiling windows. Margaret stood beside him, hand on her belly, her skin glowed, her smile was rehearsed. I remembered how all of this ended, and I wasn't going to beg for scraps again. Peter folded his arms. Same offer, 10 million now, or you stay and be treated like the help. Margaret turned to me, eyes wide, not with hope, but calculation. Behind her, Daniel stood silently by the bar. Tall, pressed suit, designer watch. He smiled faintly at me, not a greeting, a warning. I remembered him, my replacement in the last timeline, her father's preferred son-in-law, the one she had been secretly seeing even before my funeral. He didn't need to speak, his expression said enough. You don't belong here. This time, I smiled back, I reached out and took the pen, signed the NDA, accepted the transfer, 10 million, done. Margaret's mouth parted slightly. Peter raised an eyebrow. You're really walking away? I stood, straightened my jacket. Yes, and I hope your daughter finds the kind of man who doesn't have to almost die for her love. As I passed Daniel, I stopped for a second. You should watch your back, history has a way of eating men like you alive. He looked confused, good. Margaret called out. Robert, wait, what are you? I didn't turn around. This time, I won't die for someone who never planned to live for me. I landed in Milan 3 days after signing the papers. 10 million sat quietly in my new account, but I wasn't interested in luxury. I needed silence, obscurity, a place to be no one again. Italy gave me that. I enrolled anonymously in a design residency, applied under the name, KM, the signature I'd once used on a college bracelet that no one cared about. I studied in borrowed rooms, skipped gallery dinners, and sketched late into the night under broken pendant lights. My hands didn't shake anymore, the poison was gone. But the memory stayed. When I slept, I still saw Margaret smile behind that oxygen mask, her voice whispering never when I asked if she'd ever loved me. That sentence had branded itself behind my eyelids. I couldn't escape it, so I didn't try. Instead, I worked. I learned gem structures in Florence, studied cuts in Paris, spent sleepless weekends perfecting temperature-controlled metalwork in Venice. My first design show was a one-table corner booth with barely any visitors. But one visitor changed everything. A foreign buyer took home my asymmetrical sapphire choker, wore it to a state dinner in Berlin. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. Kim became a name passed between lips in boardrooms, whispered at showcases, listed in top 10 emerging talents on European design blogs. My pieces weren't just bought, they were fought over. And just like that, I stopped being the man who gave up his life for love. I became the man who molded pain into platinum. 3 years passed like a fever dream, until one email changed everything. Subject, Han Family Auctions, limited edition, Phoenix Ash, necklace. I stared at the screen too long. I remembered crafting that necklace in the dead of night, shaking with rage, cutting my finger twice. The main stone had a flaw, barely visible, but I kept it. A reminder that even beauty should carry its scars. They'd paid Hal $1 million for it. And the buyer, Margaret Han. Of course it was her. The article showed her smiling beside the piece, still glowing, still playing the victim in pearls and white silk. I closed the tab. 2 weeks later, I returned to my home country. Not to confront her. I'd been invited to be best man at Samuel's wedding. He was the only person I'd kept in touch with, the only one who never asked why I vanished. He picked me up at the airport, grinning like I hadn't been dead 3 years ago. "Bro," he said, nearly lifting me off my feet. "You're glowing. Is that what Italy does to you, or is it just 10 million in the bank?" We laughed. For the first time, it didn't feel bitter. The wedding prep was a whirlwind. Suits, fittings, endless flower choices, but the moment I stepped into the boutique, my steps faltered. She stood by the racks, examining a fabric swatch like it held the answer to everything. "Melissa." She looked up and smiled, not in shock, not in performance, just a soft, real smile that made time breathe slower. "I thought that was you," she said. Her voice was lower than I remembered, a little more seasoned, but still carried that same quiet calm from college. She hadn't changed much, still wore earth tones, still tucked her hair behind one ear when thinking. Still smelled faintly of lavender and something sharp, like clove. We talked easily. She told me she was in design too. Not jewelry, mixed materials and textiles, but she followed the industry. She'd even seen one of my pieces once. "Summer Star," she said. I knew that style felt familiar. I never told her who Kim really was. She didn't ask. Over the next few days, we kept running into each other. Samuel teased us. I ignored him. We went to the street market after fittings. She picked spicy fish cakes. I picked sugared lotus root. We sat on a concrete ledge and swapped dishes like kids.
"Still eat like you did in university," she laughed. I smiled. "Still remember how I used to sneak snacks into the library?" Her laugh softened. "You were never subtle," but there was warmth in her tone, no judgment, just memory. Later, we watched a proposal unfold at an open-air cinema. She teared up. I pretended not to notice. When the crowd cheered, she turned to me. "What kind of girl do you like now?" I didn't answer. Not yet. She didn't push. That night, I walked her to her apartment. When she turned to say goodbye, I noticed something on her wrist, a bracelet, leather-bound, worn, my first design, the one I made in college, the one I thought had disappeared. She caught me staring. "I bought it," she said quietly, "at a charity auction years ago." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing, but something inside me cracked a little, in a good way. 3 days before the wedding, we went for one last fitting. Melissa stepped out in a blush-toned gown, hair loose for once, eyes reflecting the soft gold of the boutique lights. I was adjusting my cufflinks when the door opened. Margaret walked in. Wearing white. Alone. Her gaze swept the room, casual, indifferent, until it landed on me. Then it froze. Her smile faltered. Her eyes narrowed, and then her jaw clenched. She looked at Melissa beside me, at her hand resting lightly on my arm, and for a moment, something ugly twisted behind her perfectly lined lashes. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. I saw it in the way her fingers curled into fists by her sides. I thought I had buried everything about Margaret in the soil of my past life, the pain, the betrayal, the way she looked at me like I was nothing more than a stain on her designer shoes. But trauma doesn't die just because you've crossed an ocean. It waits. And when I saw her again, standing frozen in that boutique doorway, watching Melissa smile at my side, it all came back. The hospital, the pills, the scream of monitors going flat, her fingers lifting the oxygen mask like she was taking out the trash. I didn't move, I didn't speak, but my chest burned. Margaret left without a word, but that silence didn't last long. The very next night, her face lit up every screen. A bar downtown, her makeup slightly smeared, eyes puffy like she'd been crying for days. A camera caught her hunched on a velvet lounge seat, empty wine glass in hand, surrounded by 2 other women who fed every word like fire to a match. "I gave him everything," she sobbed, "and he just took the money and walked away." The bartender tried to look busy. The other patrons watched, some filmed.
He abandoned me when I was 7 months pregnant, lied, used me, and now he's flaunting some new woman like none of it happened. Her voice cracked for the camera at the perfect moment, and people believed her. The clip was viral within hours. Margaret Han, tragic heiress betrayed by her selfish ex. Comment sections filled with knives. I hope that bastard rots. Disgusting, men like him are all the same. Is this the same guy who sold her ring designs? Thief. I read every comment, and I said nothing. Because in another life, I had tried to defend myself, tried to explain, and it cost me everything. Melissa found me 2 days later. I was in the hotel gym, running, not for fitness, just to outrun the noise. She handed me a bottle of water and sat beside the treadmill. Didn't say anything at first, just watched. Finally, she broke the silence. You saw it, didn't you? I didn't answer. She's good at performance, always was. My eyes met hers, no judgment, no pity, just quiet understanding. She's lying, I said. I know. That was it, not prove it. Not then. Why is everyone saying otherwise? Just 2 words, I know. That night, I walked her back to her place again. It had started to become a routine, one I didn't want to end. The streets were still, bathed in amber light. As we reached her door, she hesitated. I want to show you something. She led me to her bookshelf, pulled down a small velvet box. Inside was the bracelet, my bracelet. Worn and imperfect, the leather slightly cracked, but the metal centerpiece, my first ever carved design, still gleamed under the dim light. I bought it during a silent auction, she said softly. No one else bid on it, but I recognized your style right away. I ran my thumb along the edge. I had long forgotten what that piece looked like. It had been mocked back then. Some professor even said it was technically interesting but emotionally confused. But she'd kept it. It reminded me of you, she said. The version of you from college, the one who used to sketch during class breaks, the one who lent me his umbrella during a flood and pretended he didn't get soaked on the way home. I didn't remember doing that. She did. My throat tightened. Melissa, why didn't you ever say anything back then? Her smile was bittersweet. Because you were already looking at someone else. She didn't say Margaret's name. She didn't have to. We stood there for a long moment. I could feel the weight of all the time we had lost, the years stretched thin by wrong choices and cruel timing. I never forgot you, I said. Her eyes flickered with something soft and painful. I never stopped hoping you'd come back. Later that week, the public commentary got worse. Margaret had spun another version of events, this time with edited screenshots, an anonymous source claiming I'd sold her private designs and used her to launch my career. My name trended again, for the wrong reasons. Samuel called, furious. This is defamation. You should sue. Hell, I'll call a lawyer right now. I'm not giving her more oxygen, I said. But the real test came 2 nights before the wedding. Melissa and I were attending a pre-ceremony gala, a soft launch hosted by the bride's side. Everyone was dressed in muted golds and creams. A violinist played near the floral archway. People whispered when I walked in with Melissa. And then they stopped whispering. Because Margaret arrived. Dressed in ice blue silk, hair pinned high like a queen returning to claim her throne. Her gaze swept the room before locking onto me. She approached slowly, champagne glass in hand. Robert, she said, as if we were old friends. Melissa stiffened beside me. I nodded. Margaret. You look well. I am. A pause, then she turned to Melissa. Her smile thinned. You must be the new woman. Melissa didn't flinch. I'm Melissa. Margaret tilted her head. Do you know what he did to me? Before I could speak, Melissa stepped forward slightly. I know exactly what he didn't do. Margaret blinked. He didn't poison you, he didn't leave you alone in a hospital, he didn't lie to the world about who he was, and he definitely didn't wear a victim mask while holding a dagger behind his back. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Margaret's expression faltered. You don't know what happened. Melissa smiled politely. I know enough. I didn't need to say anything. Melissa had already said everything that mattered. Later, after the gala, I sat alone. On the hotel balcony, city lights glittered below, the bracelet rested on the table beside me. I picked it up again, traced the grooves, thought of the man I used to be, so desperate for validation, so afraid to lose what little love he thought he had. And then I looked inside. At who I had become. At what I had rebuilt. At Melissa, asleep in the room behind me. And I asked myself the question that had been festering since the moment I escaped death. Do I deserve happiness after crawling out of hell? Melissa had been smiling all morning. She was nervous, but her excitement made it glow into something beautiful. She had been invited to pitch her designs to a new luxury brand looking for exclusivity, and she'd worked days preparing for it. Come with me, she'd asked softly. I just want to know you're nearby. Of course I came. I dropped her off at the high-rise studio and waited in the cafe across the street, phone in hand, pretending to read headlines. I kept glancing up at the glass building, checking the lobby. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. My phone buzzed, a text from Melissa. Give me 5 more minutes, they're requesting one final review. I sent back a thumbs up. 10 more minutes passed. But then I saw her. Through the window. Margaret. Walking into the same building. My chest went cold. At first I thought it was a coincidence, maybe she had an unrelated meeting, maybe she didn't know Melissa was there. Then I saw her assistant hand her a folder, the same logo as Melissa's pitch brand. She opened it, scanned the page, and smiled. It wasn't coincidence. I left my drink and crossed the street. The receptionist didn't stop me. One flash of an old press badge with my name on it, still active in some forgotten database, and I was in the elevator. I didn't walk into the meeting room. I stopped outside. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Margaret stood at the head of the table, Melissa seated opposite her with her notebook closed. I'll make this simple, Margaret said, her voice syrup thick and measured. If you walk away from Robert, I'll greenlight the partnership myself. You'll get the deal, you'll get a blank check, and I'll make sure your name is everywhere next spring. Silence. Then Margaret added, softly, but if you stay with him, I'll bury you. You'll never find your designs in a store again. I'll blacklist you in every corner of this industry. You'll be done by summer. I felt my nails dig into my palms. History was repeating itself, word for word. Peter had once made me choose between money and Margaret, and now Margaret was offering the same deal to Melissa. Only this time, the response was different. Melissa straightened her spine. I didn't realize you were still so afraid of him. Margaret blinked. Excuse me, if Robert means nothing to you, why offer me this deal? Why waste your power on a nobody like me? Melissa stood slowly, closed her portfolio with grace. I'd rather struggle in an honest silence than succeed in a gilded lie. Margaret's voice hardened. Do you think this is a fairy tale? That you can walk out of this and still win? Melissa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I don't need to win. I just need to never become you. She turned and walked out. And I stepped aside. She paused when she saw me. You heard? I nodded. I didn't speak. I just reached for her hand. We walked to the elevator together, and Margaret followed. Wait! Her heels clicked hard against the tiles as she hurried after us. In the lobby, her voice broke. Robert, please, just hear me. I turned. Melissa stopped beside me, silent, watchful. Margaret's makeup was perfect, her dress was flawless, but her eyes, they were wild, shaky, not rehearsed this time. I had a dream, she said. I stared. I saw everything, the past life, what I did, the baby, the poison. I saw you dying in that hospital bed. I saw myself walking away. My mouth dried. I didn't understand why I kept dreaming about it, but I woke up with the taste of guilt in my mouth, over and over. Her voice cracked. I hated you so much before. I thought it was your fault. But now I remember. She looked at me like she wanted to fall apart. I was wrong. I was selfish. And you. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You were the only one who ever really loved me. She stepped closer. Let's start over. I didn't move. Give me another chance, just one. I'll fix it.
I'll undo everything." Tears ran down her face, real ones. But I had cried once too, alone in a hospital bed, wondering why my wife wasn't there to hold my hand as I slipped away. And when I did ask her, she said never. I stared at her. "You remember the past now?" She nodded. "Yes." "Then you also remember what you said at the end." She froze. "You said I was nothing." Tears welled again. "I didn't mean it. But you did." I looked down at the woman I once loved so blindly, I gave up my entire future for her. Then I looked to my right, at the woman who stood silently beside me, letting me choose, never forcing me, never pretending. I turned back to Margaret. "Late love," I said quietly, "is worth less than grass." She flinched, and I turned away, Melissa's hand still in mine. We stepped outside, the cold air hit my face like clarity. Neither of us said anything until we reached the car. Melissa finally asked, "Do you believe her, about the dream?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe she did remember. Would it have changed anything?" I shook my head. "No, because I didn't need her to wake up, I needed her to love me when I was still asleep." Melissa squeezed my hand. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt peace. The sky bloomed gold above the rooftop terrace where our engagement was held. Strings of warm lights hung like falling stars, and soft instrumental music drifted over the marble tiles. The media had already arrived, whispering excitedly, flashes occasionally bursting across the edges of the ceremony like applause in light. But none of that mattered to me. Only one thing did, Melissa. She stood at the center of it all, dressed in a pale blush gown with pearl detailing, her chestnut brown hair half up, glowing beneath the evening sun. Her expression wasn't flashy or dramatic, it was quiet, steady, unshakable. She had been my anchor long before either of us realized. When I stepped forward, the velvet box in my hand wasn't for a ring, it was for a necklace, my necklace. Handcrafted in the early mornings and sleepless nights, designed around a single tear-shaped diamond surrounded by intertwining gold lines, symbolizing chaos unraveling into clarity. At its heart was a hidden engraving. "After death, I chose you." The piece was called The One. "Melissa," I said, voice steady but low, "you reminded me what trust feels like, what peace sounds like, what love is, without conditions." She smiled, soft tears slipping down her cheeks. I lifted the necklace and fastened it gently around her neck, the diamond resting against her collarbone like a final punctuation to a story that had rewritten my soul. And then I knelt, not because I had to, but because she deserved every moment of reverence. "Will you marry me?" Her hands trembled as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Robert, always." The moment burst into cheers and camera flashes, a storm of congratulations and admiration. My name, Kim, trended worldwide within an hour. The One was hailed as a revolutionary piece of symbolic design, orders flooded in. Articles called it an artifact of love's resurrection. But the storm didn't last long. Less than 6 hours later, another headline consumed the internet. Margaret Han hospitalized after suicide attempt, Dominic's infidelity exposed. It hit like a silent bomb. I stared at the screen, my hand unmoving around my coffee cup. Melissa saw the tension in my jaw. "You don't have to go," she said, quiet. "I know," I replied. "But you want closure." I nodded once. She took my hand, leaned forward, and kissed my temple. "I'll wait for you." The hospital was cold, too clean, too quiet. They led me to a room in the farthest wing, a private one, of course. The Han family still cared about appearances, even if their house was falling. Margaret lay in the bed, pale against the sheets. Her hair was loose for once, her makeup gone. Her face looked thinner, eyes bruised with exhaustion. When she saw me, something inside her flickered back to life. "Robert?" I said nothing, I waited. "I didn't mean to scare anyone," she whispered. I didn't know how else to stop hurting." The silence stretched. Then she said the words I knew were coming. "Dominic cheated on me, from the start, with my assistant, with strangers, with power. It was never about love." I stayed silent. She continued, her voice shaking. "And when I confronted him, he laughed, said he only got engaged to me because Peter promised him the company after marriage, said I was just a brand merger in a dress." Her hands fisted the sheets. I gave up everything for him. After you, I thought he was better, more capable, more high class. I wanted to erase what I'd done to you by moving on fast. Tears slid down her cheeks. But I was wrong. Still, I waited. She looked up at me. You were the only one who ever loved me, even when I didn't deserve it. I didn't nod. I didn't reach out. She swallowed hard. The dream. It wasn't just a dream. I remember everything now. The hospital room. The poison I gave you. The abortion. The things I said when you asked me if I ever loved you. She choked. I lied. I wanted to punish you for staying. For choosing me over yourself. I didn't move. I hated how much you loved me because it reminded me how empty I was inside. That part hit harder than I expected. Then she said it. I was pregnant, in the first life, the baby was yours. The air left the room. I said it wasn't, because I knew it would hurt you, and I wanted it to. I wanted to blame someone for the guilt clawing inside me. I closed my eyes briefly. She reached out with trembling fingers. Please, she whispered, can we try again, not as we were, but as we could be now? I've changed, Robert. I remember everything. I regret everything. Please, let me fix it. I looked down at her, at the woman I had once been willing to die for. And I saw her clearly for the first time. Not the princess, not the heiress, not the manipulator. Just a broken girl who had burned everything she touched and now sat in the ashes. I stepped closer. You know what's cruel? I asked softly. She looked up, hope in her eyes. You were right, back then. Her brows furrowed. I did love you more than I should have. I gave you more than I gave myself, and when I died, all I could think was, maybe she'll feel sorry. I leaned in, voice steady. But I don't need your apology, not anymore. She blinked. So, you forgive me? No. Her lips parted. Not everything can be repaired with just an apology. I turned toward the door. Behind me, I heard her sob. So that's it? That's really it? I paused once, but I didn't turn around. It ended the day you took that oxygen mask. And then I walked out. The hall outside smelled of flowers. Melissa was waiting at the end of the corridor, standing by the windows, sunlight painting her in gold and peach. She looked up the moment she saw me, worry briefly flashing in her gaze. I walked straight to her. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. I slipped my hand into hers. She held it like it had always belonged there. And without looking back, we left. The door behind us clicked shut. So did the past. Snow drifted softly outside the registry office windows, the city humming far below like a muted orchestra. Cameras clicked beyond the glass, reporters crowded the steps, and headlines were already flashing across social media. International designer Kim marries longtime muse Melissa Chen, the one finds his one. But inside the room, it was silent. Melissa's hand rested in mine, warm and steady. 2 red marriage certificates lay between us on the polished counter, the ink still wet. The officials had stepped back to give us a moment, their polite smiles fading into the background. I turned the papers over slowly. 3 years ago, I'd signed another set of documents, divorce papers already prepared by the Han family, handed to me like a dismissal slip. That ink had felt like blood. This ink felt like sunlight. Melissa leaned her head lightly against my shoulder. Her necklace, the one, caught the dim light, scattering it across her collarbone. It's done, she whispered. I squeezed her hand. It's beginning. When we stepped outside, the flashbulbs were relentless. Questions soared through the air like birds. How does it feel? Is this your greatest design yet? What does the one symbolize? But I didn't answer. I simply held Melissa's hand higher, a silent statement. She smiled softly, and the crowd's roar turned into applause. For the first time in years, my chest felt weightless. That night, after the reception, we retreated to a small suite at the top of a boutique hotel. No photographers, no noise, just us. Melissa placed the certificates on the bedside table like 2 precious stones. They look heavier than they are, she said with a shy laugh. I sat beside her. They're heavier because they're real. She reached for my hand. Do you feel at peace? I looked at her and realized I did.
Not the brittle piece of escape, but the warm piece of belonging. We turned off the lights and lay back, the city stretching below like a galaxy. Melissa's breathing evened out against my shoulder. I was almost asleep when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but some leftover instinct from my old life, made me answer. Robert. The voice was soft, hollow. Margaret. My grip on the phone tightened. I know I said I'd never call again, she whispered. I promise, this is the last time. Melissa stirred slightly beside me, but didn't wake. I stood and walked into the bathroom, closing the door. I saw the photos, Margaret continued. You holding her hand, you looked happy. Her voice cracked. I wanted to hate you again, to say it should have been me, but I can't. Silence stretched between us. Do you remember, she said softly, that alley, when you threw yourself in front of that knife for me? You bled all over my dress and I swore I'd repay you. I thought marrying you was repayment, but really, it was just me trying to ease my guilt. You deserved better than me even then. My throat tightened. I told you I never loved you, she continued, voice trembling. That was a lie, I did. I just didn't know how. I was too used to taking. Too used to being adored. I didn't know how to stand still and hold someone's heart without breaking it. She inhaled sharply. I destroyed everything. And then I watched you become everything I claimed you'd never be. That's when I realized I'd killed more than our child. I'd killed the only man who ever truly saw me. Her words were a knife, but not the kind meant to wound. They were the blade of someone carving their own confession. I don't want your forgiveness, she whispered. I just wanted you to know I loved you, even if it was too late. The line went quiet for a heartbeat, then a scream tore through the speaker. Margaret? A heavy thud. Margaret. Silence. And then the call disconnected. I stood frozen, the phone slipping from my hand. The next morning, the headlines exploded. Margaret Han found dead in Han River. Heiress leaves evidence exposing fiancé Dominic's crimes. The articles were brutal. She had walked to the same bridge where I'd once stood years ago, drunk and broken, staring at the black water below. Except this time, she didn't step back. But before she jumped, she had left a sealed envelope for the authorities. Inside were contracts, recordings, and bank transfers, everything proving Dominic had been siphoning funds, laundering money, and blackmailing her family. The evidence detonated like a bomb. Peter Han, furious and grieving, mobilized every connection he had to hunt Dominic down. For the first time, the Han name wasn't a shield, it was a blade. Dominic fled, but there was nowhere left to hide. Margaret had burned her last bridge, but she used the ashes to bury Dominic with her. I stared at the news until the letters blurred. Melissa's hand found mine. She didn't speak, she just held on, anchoring me again. A week later, we flew to Rome to escape the noise. We stayed in a small apartment above a bakery. The mornings were slow, filled with the smell of bread and coffee. The nights were quiet, filled with the sound of her breathing against my chest. One evening, as the sun sank over the rooftops, Melissa rolled onto her side. Her belly was still small, just beginning to show. She caught me looking and smiled. You're staring, she teased softly. I'm memorizing, I said. Her expression softened. Robert? Boy or girl? I brushed a strand of hair from her face, bent down, and kissed her lips gently. As long as it's yours, I murmured, I'll love it. She closed her eyes, smiling against my mouth. It's ours, she whispered. We lay there, the room bathed in a slow gold light from the window. Outside, church bells tolled faintly and pigeons scattered over the square. The phone on the nightstand buzzed once with a new headline, Dominic arrested, assets frozen, trial pending, but I didn't reach for it. Instead, I held Melissa's hand against my chest, her palm warm, her breath steady. The first rays of dawn crept across the floor, painting everything blush rose and pastel gold. It felt like a benediction. A quiet sunrise after a decade of storms. And for the first time since waking up in that penthouse lobby, I let myself believe it.